This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. That's right, I haven't on this day I haven't covered. But anyway, it's March the 29th, and one of the best NFL teams of the 1960s and 70s, the franchise, moved in the middle of the night to Indianapolis. So let's talk about the Baltimore Colts. The Colts were successful because for the 1953 NFL season, the Dallas Texans would move to Baltimore to become the Baltimore Colts. Memorial Stadium was built to lure a baseball and football team. The Colts football team played in Memorial Stadium in 1953, and then the Orioles baseball team, after moving from St. Louis, moved to 1954, played at Memorial Stadium. It was claimed to be inadequate for both the Colts and the Orioles. In May 1969, the city of Baltimore announced it would seek an increase in Memorial Stadium rental fees from Carroll Rosenblum, who owned the Colts at the time, and the team itself. Rosenblum already called Memorial Stadium antiquated. He considered building a football-only stadium on land in Baltimore County for about $20 million. And by 1971, he actually said that the Colts would not return to Memorial Stadium when their lease ran out for the 32 season. He wanted out of Baltimore for several reasons: team revenue, problems with the revenues with the Orioles having to share them, a running feud with the Baltimore Press, and his new wife, Georgia Frontier's desire to move to the West Coast. However, there was a solution to the problems. Rosenblum had a franchise swap with Irsay, meaning that Robert Irsay would actually give up ownership of the LA Rams to Carroll Rosenblum to become the owner of the Colts. So anyway, there was a stadium committee built by Baltimore. Some of the problems mentioned: 10,000 of Memorial Stadium's seats had poor views of the field, 20,000 were outdated bench seats that had no back support, and 7,000 seats were poorly constructed temporary bleachers for football games only. And there was not a lot of office space for the front offices of the Orioles and Colts. They had shared locker rooms. And of course, the bathroom facilities were inadequate. So they actually the planners came up with an ambitious project called the Baltimore Dome to build a stadium for a 70,000 seat football stadium, it would be a 55,000 seat baseball stadium, and then they would have a hockey or basketball arena there for an estimated $78 million. But unfortunately, the Maryland legislators did not pass the bill, in spite of assurances that contributions from taxpayers would just be city and state loans. The governor pulled the plug on the idea and all that. A lot of people were against using any public funds to build a new stadium and all that. So anyway, they had an amendment for declaring Memorial Stadium as a memorial of war veterans and prohibiting use of city's funds for construction of any other stadium. It passed. Anyway, the Baltimore Colts were decent in the 70s, the mid 70s. They were looking pretty good. Unfortunately, though, their playoff performances were just crappy. And Irsay shopped the Colts around in earnest, trying to get a new stadium and try to get someone to take over it. The rumors circulating that LA, Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis, and Jacksonville were going to try to snatch up the Colts. So anyway, Irsay wanted a request for $25 million to renovate Memorial Stadium. It was decreased to $23 million. Well, the plan added more seats, improved the plumbing, and gave both teams better office space. But the Orioles challenged the football improvements and refused to sign anything more than a 1 year lease. And Irsay refused to sign long term too. So of course the funds and improvements never came. So anyway, Indianapolis was looking for a team. They wanted the NFL, and there were rumors that Indy was going to be one of the teams that would be expansion teams when the NFL went from 26 to 2018 for the 1976 season. But they didn't really have a stadium. The city took it to heart and decided to construct the Hoosier Dome, aka the RCA Dome. Said that it was a key to changing the city's image and all that. Baltimore actually offered Irsay a $15 million loan and a guarantee of 43,000 seats sold for 6 years. But on March 2nd, 1984, NFL owners voted to give Irsay permission to move his franchise to the city of his choosing. And he was not sure who was going to take it: Phoenix, Indy, Jacksonville, Memphis, or even Birmingham. New York City made a plug. Well, because the Jets and Giants actually left to play at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. But Irsay narrowed the list down to two: Phoenix and Indy. The Baltimore mayor, William Schaefer, said, "We are not going to build a new stadium. We do not have the bonding capacity. We don't have the voters or taxpayers who can support a $60 million stadium. 1/3 of the people in Baltimore pay taxes. Unless enterprise builds it, we won't build it." Phoenix made, made promises and all that. They were giving them a below market rate $15 million loan and rent free use of Sun Devil Stadium, which is the Arizona State football stadium, and all that. Irsay was going to meet with the Phoenix group, but with the meeting leaked out and reported by the media, Irsay had to cancel. Expansion was placed on hold, and Indy was not too pleased about it. Robert Irsay would visit Indianapolis February 1984, and emotionally he was going to make the move. Meanwhile, the General Assembly of Maryland became involved in the dispute. On March 27, 1984, they passed legislation giving the city of Baltimore the right to seize ownership of the Colts by eminent domain. Anyway, however, the Maryland legislature's move was that they not only threw down the gauntlet, they put a gun to Irsay's head and cocked and said, "Want to see if it's loaded?" They forced him to make a decision that day. Anyway, Phoenix's group withdrew its offer, offering the Senate's actions by the state of Maryland. So, thus, it would be down to Indianapolis. The city of Indy offered Irsay a $12.5 million loan, $4 million for training complex, and the use of its $77 million Hoosier Dome. Irsay would agree. After he got off the phone with Irsay, Mayor Hudnut of Indy called his neighbor and friend, who was actually the CEO of Mayflower Transit, to get the team's trucks to go to Baltimore and all that. So Smith sent 15 Mayflower trucks, arriving at the Colts facility at 10 p.m. at night. Irsay and Hudnut would have moved quickly because they feared the Maryland House of Delegates would approve, and the governor would sign the bill, meaning that the team could be seized by the state. So workers loaded all the team's belongings and the trucks left for Indianapolis. It took 8 hours to do so. Of course, the delegates passed the bill quite easily, and with the governor signing it. So if it wasn't for the Mayflower trip to Indianapolis, and of course the iconic picture yet you see, then the Colts would have been seized by the state of Maryland. Robert Irsay ordered the drivers to avoid using Interstate 70 until after you leave Maryland. Each of the 15 vehicles took a separate route into Pennsylvania before heading west on towards I-70. As each truck crossed from Ohio to Indiana, the Indiana State Police met it and escorted it to Indianapolis. The agreement had happened. the Baltimore Colts were going to move to Indianapolis, even though that they were one of the most historic teams around. The Baltimore Sun had that famous front page of Mayor Schaefer in tears. After the Colts left, and in spite of his earlier stance that the city of Baltimore would not build a new stadium, he placed the building of a new stadium as top of his agenda and all of that. So, of course, things looked bad and all that. So, anyway, the Baltimore Colts would lose their team to Indy. They lost the team name as well, as the Colts would still be the name of the Indy team. The Colts were named after Baltimore's Preakness Stakes horse race in the Maryland horse farmers and all that. Voters went to the polls and repealed that Question P amendment about the stadium and all that. The Colts would try to endorse a new NFL team for Baltimore, but that didn't really happen. Of course, Baltimore would think about building a new stadium, which they did. In 1992, they built Camden Yards, and the Baltimore Orioles moved from Memorial Stadium to Camden Yards. Its retro classic design was well received and inspired a lot of stadium designs. One aspect that stayed in Baltimore was the Baltimore Colts marching band, and there was a 30 for 30 documentary that luckily the band leaders received advance warning that the team would be moved, so they moved all their equipment from team headquarters before the moving vans arrived and all that. So yeah, they would hide their uniforms and all that. The band would stay together doing halftime shows and all that, being the musical ambassadors. Anyway, Baltimore would not see major sport, while the USFL moved the Philly team to Baltimore, and they played at the University of Maryland Stadium, and were USFL champions. They were the last USFL champions before the league folded. Another team came in existence in Baltimore. It was the CFL when they wanted to expand to the U.S. in the mid 90s, and Baltimore felt like they wanted to. They couldn't be called the Colts because there was a trademark infringement process. So Baltimore became the CFLers, and they went to the 94 Grey Cup final and lost to BC on a last second field goal. And I admit, I thought Baltimore was going to win because I would like to see an American team win. But remember, I was only 9 years old, so I didn't know much about patriotism. Regardless of that, Baltimore would get a team name. They would be called the Stallions, a name close to the Colts. And that team won the 1995 Grey Cup over Calgary. However, with the whole brouhaha of the CFL canceling the U.S. experiment because of not much interest in all that, Baltimore would soon be gone too. Fortunately, Baltimore found a home in Montreal, as that city had been within a CFL team since 1987, and Montreal got lucky. They got team Jim Spiros would move the team to Montreal. The Montreal and make the Montreal Alouettes. So it was a happy ending for the city of Montreal. They got their CFL team back, and they were competitive. They went to Grey Cups. They didn't win until 2002, but still, the Alouettes are your defending Grey Cup champions as of this taping. So anyway, the NFL would come back to Baltimore thanks to Cleveland and their own stadium brouhaha. Art Modell moved the team from Cleveland to Baltimore, became the Baltimore Ravens. However, there was an agreement made that it would be called, quote unquote, an expansion team. So practically, Cleveland was allowed to keep their history, their colors, their uniforms, and all that until a new team could be moved to Cleveland. And that team came in 1999. So Cleveland came back to the NFL in 1999, retained all their historical marks, and made the Baltimore Ravens a quote unquote expansion team. The Ravens would win the Super Bowl in 2001, pissing off Cleveland fans and all that. But yeah, all for the one of a stadium, a team dared to move in the middle of the night to Indianapolis, and it worked. Anyhow, I'm Jeff Diamond.